Welcome everyone to CFO Insights, the podcast where we delve into the latest strategies and insights for CFOs and finance leaders. As ever, I'm your host, Roel Boons, and today we're diving into the Fit for Growth methodology, a truly powerful approach that can transform how finance leaders drive their organization towards sustainable growth. And joining me today in our Brussels office here are three guests. Nick van Bosch. Hello, Nick.
Hey, Roel.
Hey, the resident expert in finance transformation and often a co-host here. So thanks for joining. And then also in particular our two key guests today, Elke van Peteghem, a director in PwC's Fit for Growth practice, and Dennis Beel, a partner with the same expertise. Hello, Dennis, Elke.
Hello, happy to be here.
Welcome everyone. But perhaps let's first kick things off with a brief overview of what is PwC's Fit for Growth methodology, Dennis. Perhaps could you explain a bit more what does our methodology really entail, and especially also why? Why do we think it's really relevant for CFOs?
Absolutely, Roel. Fit for Growth is PwC's specific strategic framework. It does two things differently than traditional approaches. First of all, it drastically bridges functions' objectives with companies' objectives, of which growth is in most cases a crucial ingredient. So the question is not bottom-up, what budgets do functions need, whether that's zero-based or previous year-based, but it's a collaborative discussion on how functions can or should contribute to the company's strategy. And if functions need investment to drive that growth, for instance, they need a bigger or a more skilled sales force, where is that money going to come from? And that is not necessarily from within that same function. As such, it's linking the budgeting and the follow-up processes to these companies' and functional objectives, and it allows CFOs to drive efficiently while ensuring that all projects that are going on are investing in the right areas that foster that growth. Second point where it's different than traditional approaches is that we have a key belief within our Fit for Growth team and the Fit for Growth framework that a capability, a way of doing things, a way of differentiating in the market can only work efficiently and effectively if it covers 6 elements. First, it starts, of course, that the functional objectives and KPIs should be totally aligned with the company priorities. And they should be mutually agreed on. So CEO and CFO and other departments should be fully aligned on this is what this function is going to do the coming years. 2, it needs to fit in the right organizational structure. 3, it needs to have the right people. And that means both the right number of people, not too much, but definitely not too few, and the right quality of people. Fourthly, it needs the right governance that manages all the interdependencies between all these functions and also all stakeholders involved. Fifth, it needs, of course, to have the right processes, and that logically translates into the 6th one, which is these processes need to be translated into right tools and have the right data available.
Okay, no, thanks. That's a great overview, and I think, to be honest, Dennis, we've already covered a lot in that sense. So great overview there. Perhaps let me first turn to you, Nick, to looking at that methodology, but turning to you from a finance perspective. What's the impact that such a methodology could have on an organization?
Yeah, good question, Roel, and the impact can definitely be substantial. So by strategically managing costs, CFOs can reallocate resources to the areas within the organization that really drive the most value. This can obviously improve the bottom line, but also it can enhance the organization's ability to innovate and compete and win in the marketplace. In addition, by focusing, as Dennis said, more on the differentiating capabilities of a company, finance leaders can ensure that the investments are aligned with the company's strategic priorities, again leading to better financial performance, but also long-term sustainability of the company.
Okay, very, very interesting to hear, Nick, and I'm also sure that CFOs will like hearing those points. and also Dennis's point. So perhaps look at how we typically approach this and also make it a bit more practical, and looking towards Elke and Dennis then, perhaps to share some examples or some case studies where Fit for Growth has been successfully implemented.
Yeah, let's go into one element, Roel. We collaborated with several companies across various industries that shared in their growth strategy a similar approach, which is an approach through strategic acquisitions. While these acquisitions, most of the time, lead to increased market share and to a better operational footprint, these companies often are faced with challenges to integrate the acquired entities into their organization. That results into suboptimal cost structures, operational inefficiencies, but more importantly, it jeopardizes current and future growth.
Yeah, indeed. So what we saw is while the management recognized that the acquisitions had brought new capabilities and also new market reach, the lack of integration was creating significant challenges. The different systems, processes, cultures across those acquired entities, they resulted in duplicated efforts, increased costs, inefficiencies. So the companies were really missing out on synergies that could drive profitability and growth in the future.
Okay, very clear, Elke. And could you elaborate a bit more on the concrete approach you took to help companies tackle these challenges?
Yeah, sure. So our Fit for Growth team was brought in to address these issues. So we started with a thorough diagnostic to understand to what extent those inefficiencies and misalignments were present in the company. And 3 main areas were identified for intervention. So the first one being integration and operating model alignment, the second one, cost optimization, and the third one, the operational efficiency. And here is our approach in a nutshell. So on the first element, on the integration and operating model alignment, we implemented a comprehensive integration plan to align all those different systems, processes, and cultures of those acquired companies. And by establishing a unified operating model, which also included tax considerations, we streamlined their operations, and we also fostered a culture of collaboration across the entire organization. So the effort involved optimizing the organizational footprint, but also harmonizing IT systems, standardizing processes, and creating that cohesive company culture with an aligned operating model that is also scalable for future growth ambitions that those companies still had. The second point was optimizing the cost structure and aligning that with their strategic objectives. So the team conducted a deep dive in the company's cost structure, identifying areas of redundancy and waste. So we implemented a zero-based budgeting approach, which ensured that every expense, in fact, was justified, but also aligned with those strategic goals. So that resulted, first of all, in significant cost savings, but also more importantly, it created also a budget to reinvent in the growth areas that was important for our client. The last point, last but not least, is operational efficiency. We introduced performance management tools and metrics so that our client could track efficiency and productivity across their organization, which enabled them to identify bottlenecks and areas of improvement, implementing lean principles and so on to enhance further operational efficiencies. And we also enrolled a training program to also equip the employees with the skills that are needed to embrace those new practices in reality.
Okay. And then obviously our audience are all finance professionals, so it might be helpful. Could we just describe also what are the concrete outcomes for that company, like truly percentages and numbers, if you could, and timeline of that?
Of course, Roel. So we're talking here about a 2-year transformation. So the results I give are across the 2 years. So first of all, if you look to the cost savings we made, the integration and cost optimization efforts resulted in 15 to 30% in annual savings, so EBITDA. Part of that, why do I use a range? Because part of that they used to reinvest in innovation and reinvest in attacking new markets. So, secondly, there was a revenue growth component here. Same methodology used, 5 to 15% increase in revenue, including improved product offerings and a wider market penetration. And then last but not least, operational efficiencies. Of course, in both SG&A, but also in the core operations of that company, this varied between 15 and 25% depending on SG&A and operational efficiencies that in turn then give better service to the clients. One last thing I want to stress here, depending on the client, the focus on each of these elements can be different. So we're today working with a client, Elke and myself, that has a big focus on cash over EBITDA.
Okay.
So that shifts the focus towards cash, but never losing the end goal out of sight. So meaning that every cash saving we are going to do, we are already thinking is how we are going to embed that into an EBITDA saving later on in the transformation.
Okay.
So I hope this client story shows that the importance of integration and strategic cost management is necessary to realize the future benefits and the future growth of our clients. And so by partnering with PwC and also embracing that fit for growth approach, we were able to transform our clients' challenges in real opportunities for future growth and also success.
One last thing I want to add, Roel, is when we talk about the way PwC's Fit for Growth team approaches these things, we talked a lot about the what now, but there are two things on the how that I still want to stress. The first thing is, this is not, as you probably heard, delivering a document. It's not like, oh, here you have your vision, and now we write a document on how you have to implement that vision. It's a co-creation process based on the experience we have at other clients, based on the benchmarks we have, and then looking on how this can be translated into concrete actions. So it's very actionable. It's not a document. It's a plan. It's a plan, and a plan that then translates into a plan into execution that in turn leads to these concrete, measurable results.
Okay. A lot there. Perhaps I first want to circle back with Nick on this, because I've heard a lot of things indeed, certainly the co-creation, but obviously there are challenges that CFOs and finance teams might have in implementing this methodology. So any word on how they could overcome these?
Oh, definitely, and I can see several challenges, Roel. Obviously, Elke and Dennis talked about a cross-functional program, and then typically the CFO is really playing a leading role in these programs because he by default can work cross-functions, bring the functions together. And one of the major challenges, I think it's not a surprise, is resistance to change. For example, Elke mentioned introducing a zero-based budgeting process, which might also put quite some effort on the different functions involved, and they might not be used to it. So it's important that a CFO is able to communicate the benefits of the program clearly and really involve the key stakeholders in all layers of the organization in the process, so it doesn't feel like something that's being pushed top-down onto the organization. Another challenge, I think it's accurately identifying which costs are strategic and which are not, because obviously you're going to be touching different departments' budgets, you're going to be reinvesting money in certain areas, but also not in other areas. So this really requires a deep understanding of the business, really the CFO being that strategic business partner, and really understanding the strategic priorities. Also there, things like more advanced data analytics can really help to fact-based those discussions. And then I think thirdly, and this is coming back to the point that Dennis made, it's really about maintaining that balance between cost management and investing in growth. And that can be tricky, because often we see that Fit for Growth, some people think, okay, this is a cost savings project, but it's about managing costs strategically, and then if there is a potential cost saving, making that decision, are we now really going to save it, or are we going to invest it in an area for growth? So CFOs also need to be careful that it doesn't become a cost-cutting exercise that then hinders the organization ability to innovate and to grow.
But I also hear that the CFO okay, obviously the whole of executive management will need to be on board, but obviously the CFO as a key person in this whole trajectory, obviously. That's also what I hear. Perhaps Dennis, turning to you for some final thoughts, perhaps on how CFOs can ensure that correct implementation, that implementation can be done successfully.
Yeah, and it's linking back a bit to what Nick said. I think the one single good advice from a Fit for Growth perspective I can give to CFOs, it is to get your organization, your finance organization, transformed from a being right organization. We have the right data, we have the right reports, we know where the margin is, we know, to a getting right organization, as such that the many good specialists you all have in your finance organizations, that they are made aware and a bit transformed actually to ambassadors of change. A bit more generalist, a bit more thinking out of the box, but especially convincing the rest of the organization on what to do with these data and how to contribute to the company's growth on the one hand, most importantly, and cost cutting on the other.
So thanks everyone. Perhaps good to wrap it up here, and hopefully our listeners will also become, just as the finance team, become the ambassadors of this methodology, the Fit for Growth methodology. But first, when we wrap it up here, I first want to thank the three of you, Elke, Dennis, Nick, for these insights and sharing the expertise. And I think an important topic for companies across every sector, really. And to the listeners, I hope that we've been able to provide some valuable insights into how the Fit for Growth methodology can really be helpful for companies and finance teams to drive sustainable growth. So thank you for listening.